about that, guys. Okay, so welcome again to Easy Steps for Making Presentations Accessible. You are joining the Alabama Assistive Technology Act program, or Accessing Potential Through Assistive Technology. We are here as part of a federally funded program to increase knowledge across knowledge access and acquisition of assistive technology. We do that through several different programs, including short-term loan devices, a reutilization program, trainings, technical assistance, as well as resources for financial assistance. We'll have some links at the end so you can learn a little bit more about our program and how we can help you in the state of Alabama get access to assistive technology. So just first, we always want to say welcome and make sure everybody's ready to go. For the session today, it's going to be more of an opportunity for you to just listen. I will have some things where if you want to try on your own, I've given you some slides to play with. Please feel free to do that. But if you have questions, please feel free to put those in the chat throughout the session. It'll be one of those things where I'll see the chat. So if there's something I feel like we need to swing back to, I'll make sure that we do that. Otherwise, we'll always make sure we have time at the end for questions. And if you prefer to just jump on the microphone for questions, just please wait until the end for that. One of the biggest questions we always get is, will this session be available? Yes, we are recording, and I have put our YouTube link up there that goes straight to our channel. So any of our trainings and any other product or demo videos that we have will be available through that channel. Okay, so next we want to talk about what we're actually doing here today and what we're going to be covering. So first, we want to just really briefly make sure we all have a good understanding of the definition of accessibility that we're working with today, and why we feel it's important to design for accessibility. Next, we're going to go over just a checklist for general guidelines in making your presentations and trainings more accessible. Some of these will apply to virtual as well as on-site. So really kind of covering that whole range of offerings for you. And then lastly, we're going to dive a little deeper into some tips and suggestions and also best practices for making your presentation materials accessible, really focusing more on PowerPoint, but a lot of the formatting and guidelines that we cover will really go regardless of what you're looking at, if it's a Word document, video, etc. Okay, so we have a small favor to ask of you. Because we are federally funded, we do need to submit some data to the government about our activities and who we're providing our services for. So we're going to have a quick poll that's going to pop up on your screen. We please ask that you complete this poll. The first one will be asking you what type of attendee you are, if you're a person with a disability, if you're a caregiver, if you're a service support provider. The next question will be what state or county you live or work in. So we'll give everybody a second to answer those questions. All right, I think we've got a couple more people that need to fill out. Okay, all right, great. Thank you so much. That we greatly appreciate it. It really does help us out. Okay, so first we need to talk about what accessibility actually is, or what we mean about, or what we mean in that word for this particular training. To be accessible for a lot of people can mean a lot of different things, right? It could mean that it's available, or, the store is open, so it's accessible. I can see a box of cookies on the shelf, so it is accessible to me. But we really want to make sure that we're all talking about the same thing. So what I've done is, this is a definition that I've kind of over the years have developed, and I'm paraphrasing from the Accessible Educational Materials website. I've provided their link down at the bottom. But generally, when I talk about accessibility for content and trainings, I want to make sure, are all the attendees able to receive the same content and participate in the same activities with relative ease and in a timely manner? Now, they may do it a different way, but are they getting that full benefit of of participating in that training or that presentation as somebody who doesn't have a disability, right? So if I'm sighted, I have full range of motion, I'm able to click on PowerPoint slides and look at the links with ease, that's not a problem. But if I'm somebody that needs a different format, am I getting that different format in a timely manner? Am I still able to access if I need a different method? So if I can't use a standard mouse and keyboard, if I need to use some other access method, can I still do that relatively easy? So that's really what we're talking about today. All right. So why is this important? Why do we need to design to make sure things are accessible for everybody? Well, actually, 1.6 billion people experience a significant disability, and this number is coming from the World Health Organization. Their most recent fact sheet was updated in March of 23. And the thing to also think about is that's a big number. That's like 16% of the population, right? But there are several people out there who may not actually consider themselves disabled, but do need specific things designed for them to be fully accessible and to be able to participate in trainings. Some things to think about are like age-related disabilities, color blindness, people who use hearing aids, people with dyslexia or ADHD, also just people who may consider themselves neurodiverse. They'll have some different needs as well and may not necessarily consider themselves to be disabled, but we want to make sure we're designing for all of those people. And ultimately, when we're designing to be accessible, we're looking at it from a universal design perspective as well, right? Because these are just 3 examples, but I think there are things that we see more and more out in the world that really benefit everyone. The big one I always think about is captioning. Everybody's streaming now. Sorry, I'm just having a little technical glitch there. When we're looking at the accessibility examples that benefit everyone, we're talking about captions and streaming, right? I know I don't live without captions now whenever I watch a video. Readable text and fonts, just making sure that things are easily visible, like I'm not having to strain my eyes to look for it. I don't necessarily consider myself a person with a disability, but I'm able to easily read things. And then lastly is reducing cognitive load. And this is something I've been talking with a lot of people about, especially after COVID and all these different things that have happened to us. We need things to be a little bit, I don't want to say fed to us, but we need things to be a little easier, right? I don't need to dig to look for information. I don't need things to be hard to get to something, right? Like just tell me what I need to know, tell me how to get there. I'm happy to do it, but don't make me dig for that extra special way to get there, right? That's just one more thing my brain can't handle at this moment. All right, so now what we're going to do is just go through a general checklist, some practices that help you set the stage for a more accessible event. And like I said, these may apply to virtual events, these may apply to in-person events or trainings. So the first thing we want to talk about is our accommodations for participants. So first, we want to inform your participants of what accommodations or accessibility features are going to be automatically provided. There's a couple of reasons to do that, but for one, it's just helpful information to know that, hey, I don't need to necessarily ask for this, but also it lets people know that this is going to be a welcoming space for me, that I'm not going to have to make kind of those extra demands, or if I do, I already know that these people are open to that, to my needs. So just a couple examples are auto captions. These are available nowadays in Zoom, in Facebook Live, and YouTube Live. There's actually a way to do it on PowerPoint as well, and we'll see if we have some time to show you how to do that. But also another good one typically is to have materials in advance, or at least to have the link right at the start of the training. I know sometimes presenters wait until the end to give people links. I like to my deadline is day of, right before we start, because some people like to write down their notes directly on the slides, or they need to upload them into a like a Braille note or some other device for them to access that content. Next, we want to provide a way for participants to make additional accommodation requests. This could include sign language interpretation or to have live captioning. So that's what we have today, is we have a live captioner who's typing out everything I'm saying. But you also need to make that a very visible thing that people can do. So part of your registration form, or at least a phone number where people can contact and say, hey, I'm going to need some additional accommodations. When you do that, however, you want to also indicate a very clear deadline to make those requests. So most service providers, if you're needing to hire captioning services or interpretation services, depending on how big or how long your training is going to be, typically they require 3 to 5 days in advance. But if it's going to be a bigger training, they may need more time to get those providers for you. So this is just a very short list, but just some typical accommodations that I've seen that people will typically request during trainings or webinars or face-to-face events. So again, live captions, having any materials in advance, alternative formats of printed materials. So if you're going to do conference program or flyers, is there a digital form that's available that can be easily formatted into Braille or some other type of file? American Sign Language interpretation, auditory description for videos. So if you're going to show them a movie or a longer video, you may need to have the auditory description for that movie or video available for people. A copy of the transcript for after the session. Some people like to have that transcript instead of just the captions during. They'll want the transcript from after. Accommodating for personal attendance. So if they have somebody that's coming with them, a caregiver or a nurse, making sure that there's an extra seat for that person and they're not necessarily having to pay for that extra person, because that is an accommodation. Service dog relief area, and then dietary needs. The next thing you want to do is set some expectations and provide instructions. And the reason why you want to do this is, again, reducing that cognitive load, right? We want to make it easy for people to participate. And then just, again, letting them prepare themselves and be ready to learn and engage. So first, you want to look at agendas and schedules. Depending if you're just doing like a webinar like this or a little training face-to-face, agendas are great. I put one at the very beginning. They don't have to be long and involved, but you just want to make sure that they're easy to read and easy to access. And again, just lets people know what to expect. Any guides for navigation or tutorials. If you're doing something where people are going to have to log in, and if it's something new, if it's a new platform, so if you're doing like a big webinar and you're not using Zoom or something people are used to, you may need to have some instructions for how people need to log into that. Making sure people know how to use mute, camera, and chat, especially when you're doing virtual trainings like this. You may need to, again, briefly review where to locate those tools, right? So I had mentioned earlier about the chat if you have questions, and I did forget to mention that earlier, so I'll do that now. To find your chat, it will be down at the bottom of your screen. It's typically about the 4th option, and it'll see like a little chat bubble, and then you'll just click on that and your chat button can pop up. And then you want to remind your participants how they are expected to participate, right? So I mentioned earlier at the beginning, for now, if you have questions, put them in chat. We'll use the microphone at the end of the session for everybody, so they don't have to worry about being expected to be on microphone. Camera requirements. So I want to talk a little bit about this because sometimes when we're doing trainings and presentations, people like to make all their participants turn their cameras on. And sometimes there's a really good reason for that. But I also want to pose some reasons why you may not want to require participants to turn a camera on. For some people, for their camera to be on and useful and for you to see them in their little square, they may have to be in a position that is uncomfortable for them, or they may not be able to hold for long periods of time, just based on their camera setup or their laptop setup. Some participants may become very self-conscious And it's not so much that they can just, turn the view or cover up the camera to see everybody else. But if they know a camera is on them, they're no longer able to really engage with the content because they just know a camera is looking at them, and they have to feel like they have to, be performative and make sure that, they're standing exactly how they're supposed to be standing, and their face is exactly what it needs to be showing. And they're not really able to really fully engage with the content. I know for me, I don't mind. I'm fine being on camera. I don't mind that if it's on while I'm not doing anything. But for some people, maybe they need to put themselves in another position while they're sitting, and they don't necessarily want people to have to see that. Maybe people like to walk around a room while they're listening to the presentation, and they can jump on chat or on the mic when they need to. But for other people, that might be distracting to see, so they prefer to turn that camera off while they're moving around. And then the last one is internet speeds can really be impacted by having a camera on. And especially if you have lots of people with lots of cameras going on, it's easier for people's computers to function if they don't have to have the camera on. Okay, next one we want to talk about are visual descriptions. And what we mean by this is a couple different things. So sometimes you will attend trainings or presentations, and the presenters will provide kind of a personal description and maybe a physical appearance description. Ultimately, that's really a personal choice. I find I don't often do it unless I'm especially speaking at a panel. And so then that way people can identify voice. If they have some vision, maybe they can, that helps them differentiate to know between the blonde and the brunette. And sometimes it does just make for a more personal atmosphere. I do not get very, very specific. If I were to do one today, I would say, I'm Jessica McKay. I'm a white woman in her early 40s. I have brown hair pulled up in a ponytail, and I'm wearing some earbuds and glasses. And that's about all I would probably say. And again, speaking to what's relevant in that moment. Again, personal choice. Next, talking about what's on the slide. Again, that's a visual description you have to provide. I've been to several trainings where people will have data or charts or this wonderful image, and they will say, and as we reference this image, tell me what you see, or, they don't even say that. So based on this image, we know that blah, blah, blah. Well, if I don't know what the image is of, how am I relating that information? How am I making those connections? So if I'm going to have an image, I say, look, we have this cat that's trying to type on this keyboard. And that's a, XYZ reason for, something not working. Now I'm making that connection. If I'm going to have a chart, again, I need to explain what's on the chart. I may not need to get full on detail, but I can say, this chart is demonstrating a growth over the last 3 months in assistive technology use amongst seniors. Okay. Now where it says read all the text, you don't have to read all of it, but you do have to reference all of it. So if you're going to have text up on the slide, you need to reference it in some way, shape, or form. Okay. Prepare the people for the video that they're about to watch. So if you have a video, you're going to show a clip. Be ready to tell them what that is. Are they going to watch a movie clip? Is it somebody doing a demonstration? Who are the speakers? What's the environment? Again, keeping it to what's relevant to the content, to the context. Okay, I think this is our last one before we start having some fun. Tech checks and user testing. I myself was trying to have tech checks all morning and still had some failures, but that's okay. But that's why it's always important to do those. So first thing is, especially if you're doing a new platform or have lots of links, or you need people to do multiple steps to get to somewhere, you really want to have multiple people test that out, not just yourself, because you know what to anticipate, you know how to troubleshoot it. If you can, find somebody who's never used that platform, or people who are not going to that session, because they don't know what to expect, they don't know what to anticipate, and they're going to be a better tester for you. Tech checks, always, always, always. Check your sound quality for microphones, check your lighting. These are really more for those virtual settings, but also really too for in person, right? How many times have we gone and somebody's microphone doesn't work, or they test out the slides, but they forget to test out the slides when the lights are on or off, etc. And then lastly on this one, just make sure you have access to your materials online. We ourselves ran into that problem last week where a storm ran through and crashed the Wi-Fi throughout the whole conference. Thankfully, I did have a copy on my computer, so we were able to keep going. So, okay, now let's kind of dig in a little bit to make accessible materials. But first, I'm just going to check the chat to see if we have any questions. We're good? Excellent. Okay, so this is my amazing presentation example. Look how colorful and fun and engaging this is, and I apologize in advance. But we wanted to kind of show a very worst case scenario, and I will say trends have led towards the better, where people are not nearly as egregious as I remember the early days kind of everybody making PowerPoint presentations. But so as you can see on the screen, I have this like purple polka dotty background. So it's kind of, fuzzy with this very hard to read title that says amazing presentation, and it's almost the exact same color as the background. So it's very hard to see. My name is right underneath it, but it's in the scripted text. So again, very and I wanted to show this one because this is actually a template that I pulled from Microsoft. So when you do create your PowerPoints through Microsoft, they have several templates available that actually have different layouts. So it's not just the standard, title, content, title to content. They'll have some other ones that have like a timeline, or if you want to put in specific types of charts and graphs, definitely take a peek at those, because a lot of those have already been designed. So it's easier for people who are using a screen reader or have to use a mouse and keyboard, or excuse me, just keyboard access or alternative access to access and navigate that content, as opposed to if I were to just throw a whole bunch of text boxes and shapes on there. So I'm actually going to exit out of this, and hopefully it's going to show up for you all. And what I mean by that is, so here I am back at my first screen, and all I'm going to do is I'm just going to tab through. And as you can see, it's going to tab through every single one of the things that it can tab, which means it's going to tab through all of these little circles. Now, if I'm a screen reader user, and as I'm tabbing, it's going to read image, 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 image the whole time. Okay. Whereas if I go to this one, you would think, but Jessica, there's going to be all these squares. It's going to take forever. It won't, because the way Microsoft designed this template, I'm going to get my title that says amazing presentation. I'm going to have Jessica McKay. I'm going to go to my bit.ly link. I could probably make that font a little bigger. But then it just goes to that top right bubble, conversation bubble picture. Then it's going to go to the left where the robot is, and then down to the bottom where I have my little great job image. And that's all it's doing, are those elements, because that's how the template was created. So just something to think about. When you are doing your PowerPoints, if you go to File and do New from Template, now this is the Microsoft one, so you don't get as many options, but if you go online, you can actually search for other ones, even for Mac. But look, I have all of these different types that I can choose from. I really like the quotable one. I just have to change the background a little bit on that one. But lots and lots of good accessible templates for you through Microsoft. Okay. So when we are creating materials, and this applies not only just to your PowerPoint, but to your documents, etc., is to slide. And I have linked you to a really great resource that will dive deeper into what each of these mean. And then my next couple of slides, I'm going to re-emphasize and kind of dig a little deeper into what these mean. So first is S for styles that are used for section headings. Links are meaningful. Images have text description. Design is perceivable with high contrast. And evaluation is holistic and authentic. And so let's dive into a little bit of what each of these things mean. So readable, and I know it's not my slides, but it was easier for me to break it up this way. So when we're creating our materials, we want to make sure everything is readable. Font size, it's super important. I've seen some people that say minimum 14, minimum 18. I find 16 to be a good minimum requirement for printed materials. If somebody needs large type or large font, that's usually a good place to start. Face type or typeface. That means kind of the style of font, right? So like Arial or the dreaded Comic Sans. There is no one right typeface. I know that there's, like the dyslexia fonts that are out there, etc. I tend to stick to the Arials myself. Again, there's no really one right type. We just want to avoid complexity. So think about that very scary slide that I showed you, right? So like this is kind of hard to read, that title when it popped up. It's kind of blocky, but the way it's all spaced, it's hard to distinguish each of those letters. So again, just really making sure you're avoiding complexity. And having too many types of font on one screen, again, makes it way busy and hard to read. Heading structure. Headings really help with navigation, not just for people who use screen readers, but also for just your general users. Let me see if I can show you guys real quick. Yeah. So I'm in, I just exited out of the presenter view for my slides. And so I went into this view. And if you look at the outline view and see, look, it makes this nice kind of readable way to navigate these slides. So if I don't want to have to click to get somewhere, I can scroll through and go, oh, did we cover that somewhere else? And I can get to it from there. Okay, and then again, templates, and that's going to ensure proper reading order. And I'll talk about that a little bit later too. So again, when you're using PowerPoint, really grab a template first, if at all possible. Readable content continued. So a couple more things to talk about making things readable. Plain language, avoid jargon, avoid acronyms. Acronyms are useful, but just the first time you introduce the acronym, make sure you tell the audience what it stands for. And then color contrast, right? I have nothing against color. I will admit I'm usually the world's most boring PowerPoint creator. I like color too, but just make sure, white on black, black on white. If you want to throw colors in, wonderful. But again, just really making sure you have that good contrast, and we'll have some links for you to test those later. Media considerations. So looking at the images you use, if you're taking them to the website, if you're taking them to a video, here's some things for us to think about. Alt text, right? So when we're talking about images, graphs, and charts, alternative text provides that text description for the visual component. So if I have a picture, remember I mentioned my little cat typing on the keyboard. If I'm going to have that image up, I need to have a description that says, small cat typing on a keyboard. Otherwise, if somebody's using a screen reader, it would just say image, or it would say, if it had a file name attached to it, sometimes it'll just pull up the file name. PowerPoint will try to do some auto-generated descriptions, but you really want to check those because it might do an okay job, but it may not provide the really important information you need out of it. So when we talk about that, that's my next part, is how much information do we need? And again, it's about what's important and what's relevant. And I have another slide where we'll go a little deeper into that. Descriptive hyperlinks. Again, we're not seeing this as much as we used to. So a bad example is says to register, click here. And then the good example says complete this registration form. And then I have it underlined, or I have a link that just for the words registration form. The reason why we do this is for a couple different reasons, but for screen readers, when screen readers pull up the web links, so like if they're seeing this, it will typically pull a separate window that has all the links that are available on the screen or on a web page. And it will just pull the text that is the link. So it'll just say, click here. So if you have a lot of click here, click here, click here, click here, it doesn't actually tell me really where I'm going until I click on it. Whereas if it says registration form, maps, you see where I'm going with this? It's giving you that just additional information. Media considerations continued. So we want to talk about videos. Anytime you are showing a video, you need to make sure it's captioned. Auto captions, especially if it's something pre-recorded and you're showing later, you really need to make sure those are good edited captions, timing is good, etc. And then you want to avoid flashing lights or images. It's very distracting for some people. It can also be very harmful to other people who are photosensitive, etc. So you want to avoid those flashing lights and images in your videos. Or if it's going to be there for like a brief amount of time, you need to let your audience members know that, hey, it's going to do some flashing lights. There's a really cool spinner that I've seen that you can like draw names from. But if you use it, you'll see this big, colorful spinning wheel go up on the screen. And when we've used it before, we've told people, look, it's going to spin around all these colors. Please look away if that's going to be something that's going to be bothersome for you. Okay, so let's talk about alternative text a little bit more in depth. Again, it describes the content of your images, graphics, and charts for those that can't see the images. It's also useful if you're designing websites for if the images are breaking, if your website's not loading, or people have internet connection issues, they can actually put a setting that'll say, don't load the images. That way the alt text will show up, so at least they know what that image was supposed to be, as opposed to just a little broken image picture. The description should really reflect the purpose of the image and why you put it there, right? So if I have this cat on a keyboard or on that typing on a keyboard, and I'm talking about how this is a fun, playful cat that, people enjoy looking at. Well, do I need to talk about the couch that he's sitting on? Do I need to talk about the goldfish bowl that's right beside him? Maybe if there's like a little cartoon bubble that shows that he's typing a story about a little fish that's in the goldfish bowl. So really it's about being accurate, it's being succinct. And if it's just decorative, if it's just something to be a cute little cat typing on a keyboard, and it really isn't doing anything else, you can always just type in double quotation marks in that box. And I'm going to show you a quick video that shows how a voice or a screen reader is going to see not just the image, but also some of those other things we were talking about in terms of the text, the font types, etc. Let me slide this over here.
This text has been formatted by highlighting text and changing fonts. No alt text has been added to the image. Heirloom tomatoes for everyone.
Let me start this over again, sorry. New computer setup, everybody. Okay, so what we're seeing on this is a screen. It's showing a Word document. There's text in different colors. So the first set of text is in all caps and red. The next text is black and bold. And then there's just regular plain text, and then you'll see an image of tomatoes, and then it will go back to that red all caps text. And then the screen reader is reading the text from the top. Okay.
No alt text has been added to the image. Heirloom tomatoes for everyone. Heirloom tomatoes are fabulous. If I thought people wanted to read a lot of text about heirloom tomatoes, I would write a lot here. Graphic. Page 2. The following text has been formatted by using styles that tell the reader when headings are encountered. You will hear the heading level right.
So I'm going to stop for a second. If you noticed, it didn't tell you that this is in bold or this is bright red in alt all caps. And this is where headings are important. So it's going to talk about the heading structures now. So you'll actually hear heading levels being read out loud because the font isn't just pretty font. It's actually structured and labeled as specific heading types.
Before the headings are read. This helps users of text reading software navigate and understand organization in the document. Alt text has been added to the image. Heading Level 1 Heirloom Tomatoes for everyone. Heading Level 2 Heirloom Tomatoes are fabulous. If I thought people wanted to read a lot of text about heirloom tomatoes, I would write a lot here. Graphic. This is a photograph of a pile of heirloom tomatoes.
Yep.
There are tomatoes of many colors and shapes in the photograph. Page.
And then it's going to say page break, etc. So again, just a way to see how a screen reader is detecting and reading that text to the user. Okay, so I want to do a little bit on showing you how actually it's really easy to add alt text to your images in PowerPoint, also in Word, etc. So I'm going to go exit back out, go to my regular view. So I'm in that editor view of my PowerPoint now, and I have my screen says alt text practice for my title, and then beside it I have this butterfly cycle image. So it's showing the egg and the caterpillar and the pupa and then the butterfly. So I have the image. I'm going to right click, and then I'm going to see in that drop down menu kind of towards the bottom-ish where it says view alt text. And then over on the right side of my screen, Microsoft actually gives me a little bit of information and guidance. So it says, how would you describe this to somebody who is blind or low vision? And it gives you some things you may want to include, right? Subjects in the detail, the setting, the actions or interactions, or any other relevant information. Now, just for fun, I'm going to see what happens if I do the alt text or the generating the alt text. And so here it just says a diagram of a butterfly life cycle, which actually isn't bad. I mean, it's true, that's what it is. But maybe I need to provide some additional information. Butterfly life cycle starting with the egg sitting on a leaf, followed by the caterpillar eating the leaf, and then so on and so forth. I may not feel like I need to do the arrows, or if I wanted to do those, I could say something about egg with an arrow pointing to the caterpillar, pointing to the pupa. Again, depends on how much information I feel is actually needed to convey what I want to show my students. But for me, I probably would say followed by or next, I think would show them that the order of the cycle. And then now my alt text is in that image. Okay. Sorry for flopping back and forth, everybody. Captions. So let's talk about captions. Auto captions are better than nothing. I've been really impressed with the auto captions that are out in Zoom. Like I said, YouTube Live also has it available, as well as PowerPoint. I may not be able to share how to turn it on from here because of the type of setting I'm in, but let's see if I can do that. There is a way to do subtitles or closed captions. If you were in a presenter view, you would see that little toolbar on that black side, and it would say, you'd see the little CC. When you turn that on, it'll actually pop up. But here I'm going to do this, always use subtitles, and I think it should pop up for me now. Haha. Oh, okay. So it's not detecting my subtitles right now because I didn't configure my microphone correctly for it. But essentially what would happen is as I'm talking, this is where they would pop up. Okay. And again, all your videos need to have edited captions. So there's a really easy way for you to edit videos. If you've uploaded them to YouTube, you can go in and edit those auto captions to be accurate, make sure everything's spelled correctly, etc. And then again, when you are creating your videos, it's preferred to have those closed caption files as opposed to using open captions, the ones that are burned into the video. Again, it's just more accessible for different users to have access to the closed caption file. Next, we want to talk about formatting. We're going to talk about it in a couple different ways. So for PowerPoint, each slide needs to have a unique title. So like I mentioned before, if you noticed earlier, I had readable, and then I had readable continued, as opposed to just saying readable. Again, it's to help with navigation. It makes sure that people know which slide they're on. You could do readable, and then you could do readable, 1 of 2 or 2 of 2, however you want to do it, but just something that makes it distinguishable from each other. Again, using that template to ensure reading order, and I have a slide that'll show you exactly what I'm talking about, that reading order. And then does everything need to be on the slide? It's kind of one of those less is more. Again, try not to jam everything in on it. Like I did with mine, where it said readable and readable continue. That was my choice because I could have crammed it all into that slide, but it would have been very difficult to read. And also, when I'm presenting, depending on how those captions show up, if it's going to come up like through the Zoom platform itself, it would actually take up a little bit of that screen. Or when I'm recording and they want to play the captions later, I want to give a little space at the bottom to make sure the captions aren't going to cover up presentation text. So I made that choice to extend to a second slide to continue that content. PDFs. Not all PDFs are created equal. If you are creating something from Microsoft Word or PowerPoint, that's kind of your best way if you just want to create a PDF from those as opposed to Google Docs or slides. If you're using Microsoft Word or PowerPoint, again, make sure you have all of those proper headings. You want to make sure your images have alt text, and that is to make sure that the tags, when it gets converted to PDF, will be there. There's a couple times where it may not read everything, but almost always I haven't really heard of anybody running into real significant problems using Word or PowerPoint to just hit that save as PDF. If you are creating from Google Docs or slides, the type of PDF that it's making will not be the type that is going to create those tags. And what those tags do is it lets people know those different elements and heading structures if they're using assistive technology. And then lastly, tables. Tables are for data, not for style. So sometimes we like to use tables because we think it's easier to kind of format our pictures or to help organize our text. But really it needs to be for data, because when you put a table in, you're going to see a thing that'll say like, where's your heading? What does this column mean? When people, again, are navigating through that content, is it going to read it in the correct order? And if you're just kind of throwing a table up there and putting things all over the place, your reader may not, or your participant may not get the content in the order that you want them to. So this is my example of reading order. So I've created this slide and it says, read me first, read me second, read me third. And then I have a little image of a checklist with a pencil next to it. So I'm going to go out of my presentation view back to my edit view. And right now I don't have anything selected on my screen. My cursor is not, I don't have like a little text box around that first box. So nothing's selected. And I'm going to hit my tab button. There we go. And so the first one it clicks is read me third. Now it goes read me second, read me first. Now it's going to my image down at the bottom. So it's read me third, read me second, read me first. Okay, well, that's not what I want. And the way I can fix that is to go to home at the top. And then I'm going to go way over to the far right, not quite all the way. But I'm looking for where it says arrange, and there's a little drop down, and I'm looking for this selection pane. And now I see to the right side, I have this selection pane, and I have these 4 items in a list. Now, I specifically reordered them the wrong way, so you wouldn't assume some things. So when you do this view in Microsoft, you would think the first one at the top means that's getting read first. No, it's actually in reverse. So if I want the title, meaning read me first, so I've clicked where it says title 1 and I see the little box is highlighted, read me first. So that needs to go all the way down to the bottom. So I'm dragging it down there. The picture, I actually want to be read last. So I'm going to scroll that back up to the top. Content placeholder 2 says read me third, so it's going to go underneath that picture. So now from the bottom to the top, because that's the order it needs to be in to be read the correct way, it should go title, read me second, content placeholder 2, read me third, and then picture. So when I exit out of that selection pane and I tab through read me first, read me second, read me third, and then the image. Okay, let's go back to our slides. Next, I want to talk about accessibility checkers, and this will actually cover our evaluation part of those slides. Not full evaluations, but at least a good starting place for you. Microsoft Accessibility Checker is really good, very useful. It walks you through if you have an error, how to fix that error. I'll show you that here in a second. Craggle Docs is pretty good for Google documents and slides, but again, you have some limited accessibility in those platforms, to be honest. So ideally, you really want to, if you want to make something really accessible for people, you want to create it in Microsoft first. What I will typically do is make it in Microsoft, and then I will load it if I need to load it in a Google Drive, but I'm not editing from Google, because then I'll try to convert to slides and things. So I just want to keep it, once it's done, it goes and lives in the drive. And then this last one is the color contrast checker. Let's see if I can open that and put this on top. There we go. So here is the WebAIM color contrast checker. And so when you click on this foreground color, that means the stuff in the front. So that would be your text. I have a little eyedropper, and I can actually click on the text, and then I can click on the background color, which would be white anyway. And then if I scroll down, it will tell me if I am passing. And so it's telling me about normal text, large text, and then it's really getting into some more complex graphical objects, you know, looking at it from a web accessibility standpoint. But large text, how they define it is 14 point. So just for your reference. So I always think this is a really nice tool to have. It's free. You just click on that link and it's there for you. The Microsoft Accessibility Checker is, like I said, very easy to use. You're looking for in that top row where it says review. And then over towards the right, you're seeing that something that says check accessibility. And over to the right now, I have this, or excuse me, over to the left said check accessibility. Over to the right, the panel pops up. You'll see over to the right, it says some inspection results, so errors, warnings, and then just some things to let me know about. Where it's saying missing object descriptions, it's all of those ovals that I had from that very lovely slide that I made. So it doesn't know what these are. I don't have alt text. It doesn't know its purpose in life. Slide titles. I'm missing 2 slide titles. I'm missing one on slide 18. So let's see what that one was. Let me get out of this view. There we go. So slide 18 usually clicks right to it. I think it's because I'm doing something else. So again, this didn't have a slide title on it. And then slide 29, which was the, I think that was the butterflies, because the way I made that one, it didn't have the butterfly. Oh no, it was this one. I didn't actually make that a slide title. It doesn't have a box that is designated as the title. Again, it's talking about that reading order, and it tells me which ones need that help. And then here it's talking about the alt text and letting me know, hey, you may want to review these. And then down at the bottom, it's telling me how I can fix each of these, which menu I need to go to, and providing me some additional information on what I might need to fix. Okay. All right, we're almost wrapping up. So if you have questions, we'll definitely have some time if you want to jump on the mic, but feel free to drop them in the chat as well. Let me get back to the current view here. We have several resources for you to reference and to play around with. The first three are for alternative text. That's kind of usually the big questions people have about how much information should I provide? What kind of information should I provide? And I found these to be very helpful tools to look at and to get some more information on. The next one is, again, from the Accessible Educational Materials website. They break down accessibility, looking at it through, is it perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. And again, just kind of breaking down and giving some more concrete examples of ways to make sure that your content is accessible. Accessible Use from the University of Minnesota, they have created resources for their teachers when they are creating any kind of content that they want to make sure it is meeting their accessibility guidelines. They have great examples of good alt text, how to do heading infographic for web designers. I like it not necessarily for just, but it's a visual reference for me to remind myself of some key accessibility things I need to make sure I am doing in my content creation. And then lastly, oops. And this going the wrong way. There we go. And then I have two more that I just thought were really helpful resources. This is from Cornell University and the University of Kansas that I spelled incorrectly. These were checklists for any meetings or events that they were planning on their sites. So lots of questions for people to kind of checklist and make sure that they're thinking about different types of accommodations, etc. So again, just something to really get your mind working. So we have one more poll. It looks like a lot of you may have had a chance to, oh no, I just have that old one up there. We have one more quick poll for you before we wrap up. Again, this is just to help us get that data back to the government. This is talking about, information and communication technology accessibility. Feel free to answer however you feel comfortable. We don't take offense, I promise. And then as you're answering that, I'll just let you know, we do have our own feedback survey. This is not necessarily required for the government. This is just really for us and information that we use for our future trainings and to make sure that we're providing you the type of information and things that you would find useful. So I will put that in the chat as well. And lastly, please seek us out, come find us. If you are on LinkedIn or Facebook, if you search Accessing Potential Through Assistive Technology, you will find us there. You can email us directly at aptat@rehab.alabama.gov. And then also we've provided some additional information, Alabama Department of Rehabilitation Services, our reuse centers. So if you are looking for durable medical equipment or assistive technology that has been donated, and if you're in the state of Alabama, it is free for you to take and use. And then lastly, if you're looking for more information about the Assistive Technology Act programs throughout the different states, that information is available as well. So that is it, everyone. Do we have any questions?